Star Fox has always existed in a weird place for Nintendo. Not a bad place by any means, just an unusual one. I'm not just speaking strictly on content, although you could make the argument that with its barrage of lasers and death, it might be the most violent first-party Nintendo franchise. But aside from that, Star Fox seems to exist as Nintendo's experimental series. Whenever it has a new console technology, system add-on, or new controller type to show off, there's generally a new Star Fox game right around the corner to explain what it does and show off its potential. It is with that sense of experimentation in mind that Nintendo teamed up with, of all people, Platinum Games, developers of Bayonetta 2, to bring us Star Fox Zero, the latest edition in Fox McCloud's ongoing saga to follow in his dad's footsteps by shooting down a lot of monkeys and lizards and spaceships. On the surface, Star Fox Zero seems like any other Star Fox game, or at least the ones we can all agree are good. There's a lot of shooting, there's branching paths through the galaxy that could take you to different levels, and there's a lot of adorable cartoon animals saying nonsense sci-fi words. There are, however, a few crucial differences that set Star Fox Zero apart, and it's in these differences that we find the game's real reason for existing. The first and most important one to mention is the fact that the game relies heavily on motion controls. It isn't nearly as imprecise and demanding as a lot of original Wii games you might have played, and the motion controls you do need are all contained within the gamepad itself, so it's not like you have to mess around with different controller types. The easiest way to explain it is to say that the aiming and shooting controls are basically independent of the movement controls. As opposed to previous Star Fox games, where your laser fire would travel straight ahead of you and go in the direction your ship was pointing, Star Fox Zero actually separates your ship and your targeting reticle. It doesn't always work like they'd like it to, and it does take a lot of getting used to, but it's not nearly as bad as you might be fearing right now. There's no way to turn the motion controls off, and with good reason. The nicest thing I can say about it is that every single facet of the game seems to have been designed with this motion control in mind. Enemies and bosses will have giant glowing weak spots that need to be precisely targeted in order to defeat them, and the level design is constantly throwing waves of dudes at you that can only be defeated by paying close attention to both your ship and your targeting reticle, which adds an extra layer of strategy and challenge to any given encounter. In true Nintendo fashion, the control scheme permeates every single aspect of the game, and is implemented in a way that makes sense even if it's occasionally difficult to get the hang of. Other than the new control scheme, the game still has a few surprises to offer in the form of new drivable vehicles in keeping with Star Fox tradition. The Landmaster is back as usual, and it might actually be the best implementation of the new motion aiming, since the ground-based levels give you a much better idea of where everything is and how to target it. From there, you get an all-new VTOL-style gyrocopter, which is much slower but easier to control than your R-Wing is, and is responsible for what might be the most unique level in the game. A stealthy infiltration into an Andross-controlled base that works way better than you'd expect. And finally, you get the adorably bird-like walker mode, a holdover from the legendary cancelled Super Nintendo title Star Fox 2. This mode controls perhaps the most fussily of all the new vehicles, but the levels in which you use it are generally more puzzle and platforming focused, which is kind of a welcome respite from the usual shooting action, even if the controls don't tend to do it a lot of favors. Okay, so we've had a lot of setup so far, but is the game any good? I would say Star Fox Zero really requires the player to see the forest for the trees. The trees, in this case, mostly being a weird new control scheme and the different types of vehicles. Star Fox Zero does have some faults, but they're nothing that will totally ruin your day. A lot of the boss fights tend to be long and interminable, partly due to the new controls, and partly due to a lot of them being lengthy, multi-stage slogs where death sends you back to the beginning of the level. might have also noticed there seems to be a lot of sound missing from this video. The game's unique control scheme means that the entire time you're playing, the gamepad screen is displaying a cockpit view of the action, and a lot of the sound effects and dialogue are actually coming through the gamepad speakers and not your TV. While this isn't a game breaker by any means, it is pretty disorienting at first, and does sort of limit the use of headphones, while also preventing you from using the gamepad for remote play or anything. For the most part, though, I really like Star Fox Zero. Speaking as someone who thinks Star Fox Assault for the GameCube was pretty underrated, I don't mind saying that Zero is probably my favorite Star Fox since the Nintendo 64 days. There's a lot of really sincerely thrilling moments that crop up. That signature Platinum Games sense of style and dynamics is on display through the entire presentation, and once you get the hang of the controls, or should I say if, you really will find yourself having a lot of fun. Really, it's just a shame that Nintendo took so long to make a game that demonstrates the potential of the gamepad this well. Although even I'm not enough of a fanboy to think that a good Star Fox game earlier in the system's life would have turned things around. Yeah, me too, Wolf. I'm going to go ahead and give Star Fox Zero a 3 out of 5. And hey, we should all be proud of ourselves. We got through this entire video without doing a single "do a barrel roll" joke. For GIZORAMA, I'm Tim Allen.